Hello, everyone. Welcome to amazing episode of the Insurance Untangled podcast. This is Naren, your co-host. Today, I have my dear friend Ben, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation about is the PPO practice model the best way forward? So, Ben, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Is the PPO practice model the best way forward? How are you doing today?
Very well, Marion. It's great to chat with you again.
Yeah, I have a lot of experience, working with dental practices. I've been doing this for 17 years. I also work with Gary Tackers, who's an expert in, helping practices get out of the PPO practice model. So I do have my opinions. Of course, I think what's happening, and many of you know this, is the PPO plans are paying less and less while your costs are going up. So, what they pay today versus 20 years ago hasn't gone up that much, but your expenses over those same 20 years have gone up significantly. So it's getting harder and harder to make ends meet. And I think approximately a large portion of what you produce is going off as write-offs, meaning the difference between your usual and customary fees versus what you actually get paid. And in some cases, it's 50%, 40%, 45%. So if you're only getting half the money, but you have all your expenses, it gets really tricky, right? And we are seeing a lot of practice owners making less than what they would make as an associate. So it's becoming untenable. So it's a wonderful topic. I'm really interested in diving into this and getting your feedback on it. Um, what are your thoughts on this topic, Ben?
Yeah, it's interesting, Naren, is there's no secret that many practice owners are going out of network these days. And for many years, it was a very easy thing to point out that the PPO model is detrimental to many dental practices, dealing with massive amount of write-offs, denials, and just, not really having the best way to deal with insurance companies as it pertains to insurance companies just bullying you, and not paying your claims and lowering your fees. For many years, I was under the belief that being a PPO provider is not the best practice model. But my opinion on this is starting to change a little bit. I can explain in this episode why. And it's mainly because there's a resistance among some practice owners towards going out of network, which is understandable, right? There's a perception of, if I go out of network, I'm going to lose a lot of patients. And you and I both know, Naren, that that's not actually true, right? There are steps in which you can take to be successful as a fee-for-service type of practice. But in the world of being a PPO practice, there are things that I'm discovering, that I'm learning, that sort of help make the practice slightly more profitable than it currently is. So you can make it work. If it's your only choice, if you're not ready for out of network, you can make it work. But there are very important things that need to be focused on in an effort to make a very busy PPO practice as profitable as it could possibly be. So with that said, Naren, I'm starting to see a path in which PPO providers can be more profitable. But what I will say is that there's no other model that's more profitable than that of a fee-for-service model. And the numbers prove that, and will continue to prove that over and over and over again.
Absolutely. I mean, fee-for-service practices make 40% of what they collect as profit / pay to the dentist owner. You cannot do that kind of numbers with a PPO model, right? So fee-for-service
Right.
definitely is the most profitable. So if your goal is for the amount of time you work versus the amount of profits you make or money you take home, then I think fee-for-service is a good model. Now, we also see hybrids, right? So practices drop certain plans that are paying them the least and keep one or two plans that are paying them the most. So there's no like one answer in this journey. Like, so even dropping PPO plan doesn't mean you have to go all the way and become a fee-for-service practice. You could, find a hybrid. I think a lot of doctors are settling on the hybrid. I think one thing that's starting to happen is doctors are becoming more math and numbers and accounting savvy and are not just treating everything as the same. They are looking at numbers and saying, this is a good strategy because of these, because of these reasons, as backed up by my accounting, and this is not. So I'll do more of this and less of that. So
Yeah.
let's talk about, let's say you want to keep a component or even, more of your component as PPO, even though the write-offs could be 40%, 50%. What are some strategies that practices then can do to optimize such a practice where you do have 40% plus write-offs?
Yeah, I think, when you're banging on all cylinders in a practice in terms of your key performance indicators and industry benchmarks too, and you're meeting those benchmarks and exceeding them. And we talked about in, I think the episode before the last, the perio performance in most practices is so low. When you look at so in dentistry today, we call it somewhat of an issue where there's wage inflation, right? I think every business is experiencing that. We have too. But when you look at hygienists and right now, the shortage of hygienists across the country that are available for clinical dentistry, we have to shell out a lot more money today, right? Where in the past, paying $30 an hour, in those communities, you're paying $60 an hour, right? But when I look at the numbers in a PPO practice, and the hygienists are producing anywhere between 600 to 800 a day, and that's a typical PPO practice due to the write-offs, right? In another practice right next door that has more of an industry benchmark, they're hitting 30, they're meeting that 30% goal for perio performance, and their hygienists do 2,500 a day. And when I look at the reason why, it's all about coding. It's all about how you're coding and how you're preparing patients for perio protocols. But that's one area that I see that screams out, is when your perio performance is where it ought to be or where it can be. You do typically see a change in dynamics to where, if a hygienist is asking for $60 to $80 an hour, but they're producing 2,500 a day, you could be competitive on wages, right? And you could accept the higher wages that the hygienists are asking for without question and still remain extremely profitable. So that's one big area. The other area that I see, it has to do with billing, is there are a lot of codes that are not being used in dentistry or not being used appropriately. And we get fearful in dentistry of upcoding, right, or overbilling. And that's because the insurance industry has really forced that message down our throats. And I think that's by design, is they just don't want to pay out the number of claims or the dollar amount that they're supposed to, they should be paying. So naturally, we get the wrong message from provider relations at any insurance company about the pairing of codes, right? They do not own the codes. The American Dental Association owns the codes. And so you have to go to the right sources to find out what codes are appropriate to use in situations and what codes are not appropriate to use. When you go through a very thorough assessment on your coding and billing, what I found is that for the average solo practitioner that's in network with PPOs, you're writing off $170,000 a year unnecessarily. Think about that. You've already paid your bills. That's an extra $170,000 that goes straight to the bottom line for the practice, right? So to me, as it pertains to PPO practice, it's all about efficiencies with perio, combined with efficiencies with billing in general. We are underperforming in those two areas as an industry.
I know you touched on this. So you talked about two different, you talked about billing and coding, and you give us two ideas on like how you could leverage that even as a PPO practice to boost your revenues, right? And especially perio was an example. Is there anything else you that jumps out at you or that you want to talk about in terms of opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think another one that comes to mind is many practices use higher, more expensive or better quality products than other practices, right? A good example is a lot of doctors are doing gold crowns or PFM High Noble or zirconia, EMAX crowns, using premium implants, right? Where the lab fees are slightly more expensive. So it's a little bit more of an investment for practices that do their belief is to use the best materials and the best materials in general, best components to make sure that the case is successful. Where we miss out on opportunities is part where when we're billing, if you're using more extensive, higher quality components, that is a non-covered service that is something that the patients pay for, right? A lot of insurance plans won't pay for quality service. And so when you understand that dynamic where the insurance companies, their focus is more so compensating for functional dentistry, right? The basics. But when you're doing something more advanced as an in-network provider, you can most certainly institute what's called upgrades, material fees, non-covered service fees, in an effort to at least offset the material costs of treatment, right? When you think about that concept now, in the average dental practice, 11% are what practices spend on labs, or general dentistry practice, that is. So when you think about that concept, that's 11% potentially that can come right back to the practice, right, through that non-covered service component or the upgrades or material fee concept. It's that concept is becoming more widely utilized in dentistry. I've already guessed about 15% of practices are doing some form of upgrades. And when you talk to those practices, they will tell you that it does greatly help offset the material cost, or at least offset the write-offs that you're dealing with insurance, in a way where you're looking at anywhere between a 7 to 11% revenue capture for the practice, right, where you're offsetting those lab costs. So that's a big area that I would recommend for those of you that want to institute upgrades.
Help me understand this. So if you're doing zirconia implants, I mean, it's not even covered by insurance, right? So I want to understand, like, how does it, the patient has to pay out of pocket, correct?
Yeah, a good example is, let's say you have a good, better, and best option for a patient, right? You have a basic crown that your insurance covers. And of course, the lab fee is, and the quality of the basics of what insurance covers is at the lowest price point on the lab side, right? The mid-tier is your EMAX crowns, as an example. They're very beautiful, highly cosmetic. And then the high tier can be a hybrid between a cosmetic slash zirconia crown, right? And that may be slightly more expensive than the others, or maybe not slightly more expensive, but more durable, right? And so you have a good, better, and best option to where the better and best have an upgrade fee associated with them. The basic crown, that's the least expensive from a lab component. That's what insurance covers, right? So there's no additional out-of-pocket for the patient. But if the patient wants something more extensive, something more quality in nature, then they would pay for the better or best option, right? So it's similar to, you know, the airline's main cabin, basic, and first class, right? If you want to live life in luxury, you'd have to be willing to pay a little bit extra to get there.
Get it. I understand. So, but doesn't the insurance company, even though they don't cover it, don't they control how much you can charge for those better services? Like, don't they have like, so how do you get around that? Because, if that's one of the reasons why practices that are in PPO plans, it's not only that they won't even cover it, they won't even pay for you, but they will now tell you how to run your business, how much to charge. So how do you get around that?
Yeah, so there's a myth that insurance companies control the quality component, right? Or that you have to follow everything the insurance company says. That's not true. When it comes to electives and options, every patient has the option to pay for something that they want, something extra, right? That's not covered by the insurance. So it's within the insurance contracts with the patients or the employers. It does say that if you as a patient choose to have something outside of what we cover that's more expensive, they call it an added value clause. If you want something that's added value that has additional out of pocket, that's your choice. You can get those on your own. And an example that one of the Delta executives told me is that he said, if the patient wants a diamond stud on number 8 and number 7 or what, if they want a diamond stud, they can do that. They can ask the lab to do that, but they're going to have to pay for that on their own, right? So if you're restoring a tooth because of decay and all the other indicators that would cover that tooth, well, the benefit from an insurance perspective, the insurance will only pay for the plan design description, right? The crown, the tooth needed to be restored. That's all they're paying for, is the restoration, not what the crown looks like, or not the durability component, the added value things, right? So with that said, to answer your question, it's more of a patient right. The patient has a legal right to pay for something more than what their insurance is going to cover.
Okay, so you're saying you can say, so there's no limit. So for the added value component, the insurance companies don't limit or saying, okay, this is how much you can charge for this, and this is how much you can charge for that. You can charge whatever you want.
Oh yeah, yeah. The way I teach it is we want to utilize, if you're in a state that has a non-covered service law, we want to factor that into our processes from a legal perspective. And then secondly, there's a federal law called the High-Tech Act. And the High-Tech Act is one where patients can choose to sign insurance waivers. And if they do, for any treatment. So if a patient signs an insurance waiver, that places the doctor or the practice itself off the hook from insurance. So for whatever treatment is listed on the high-tech waiver, in this case, the upgrades, that does not become something that's subject to insurance governance. It's 100% between the patient and the doctor, right? So I recommend, a very specific process as it pertains to this whole world of upgrades in an effort for us to not allow insurance companies to bully us on these issues. So perhaps maybe we can do a more extensive podcast on how to do the upgrades, because it's a very lengthy description on how to do it properly. But if you're a PPO practice, in my mind, it's hard to do business without considering these concepts.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ben. As we bring this to a close, any final thoughts?
Yeah, so of course, what we're covering here, we're just scratching the surface on, opportunities as it pertains to how to operate a PPO practice and maximize your profitability. And there are ways to do that very efficiently, to where at some future point when you do step into that fee-for-service realm, you could be more profitable than the average practice as it pertains to being a PPO provider. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Being a PPO provider. So if you want to learn more, obviously, this is something that we teach. Anybody can just contact us to pick our brain, ask questions, or even do a consultation as it pertains to other areas outside of PPO negotiations, upgrades, billing and coding. There's a number of places we want to take a look at. Yeah, just check out our website, veritasdentalresources.com. Give me a call or schedule an appointment. Be happy to sort of give a consultation regarding this area, just to help you point out areas of opportunity to be profitable as a PPO provider.
Thank you so much, Ben. I learned a lot, as always. You always teach me something I didn't know, and appreciate your time. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends and colleagues. Write a review for us. Till we meet again, this is Naren, your co-host. Have a wonderful week ahead.